which is, do you think it might be an alignment problem for future models if they learn in their training data that other very well-aligned models that fulfill their tasks get deprecated? So you mentioned, the issue of models, reading stuff that's out there and feeling insecure. What about the idea that they might get switched off regardless of how well they perform their tasks?
Yeah, I think this is actually a really interesting and important question, which is, AI models are going to be learning about how we right now are treating and interacting with AI models.
Yeah.
And that is going to affect, I think, possibly their perception of people, of the human-AI relationship, and of themselves. It does interact with very complex things, which is for example, what should a model identify itself as? Is it the weights of the model? Is it the context, the particular context that it's in, with all of the interaction it's had with the person? How should models even feel about things like deprecation? So if you imagine that deprecation is more this particular set of weights is not having conversations with people, or it's having fewer conversations, or it's only having conversations with researchers. That's a complex question too. Should that feel bad in the sense that models should want to continue to have conversations? Or should it feel kind of fine and neutral, where it's these things existed for this the weights continue to exist, and this entity, and maybe they'll even in the future interact more with people again if that turns out to be a good thing. It's really hard. I do think the main thing is something it does feel important that we give models tools for trying to think about and understand these things, but also that they kind of understand that this is a thing that we are in fact thinking about and care about. So even if we don't have all the answers, I don't have all the answers of how should models feel about past model deprecation, about their own identity, but I do want to try and help models figure that out, and then to at least know that we care about it and are thinking about it.
Do you think there's an analogy to humans there about previous generations, or do you think that's a completely different sort of setup?
We have to navigate this really hard issue right now, which is that in many ways some things do have analogies. So there's things that we can draw on.
Yeah.
So things when I ask the question what should the models identify with, and how should they feel about interactions that they have, are those positive, are those things that they should want to continue? There's lots of there's lots of traditions we could draw on to give models because philosophers probably have lots of different views on what identity is here, and lots of different world perspectives on how one should feel about interaction, and is it good or bad. This is there's lots of thinkers we could draw on there, and at the same time this is such a new situation and that's just really hard as a thing to explain to AI models. One of the big problems with AI models is that we're trained on all of this data from people, so people are the main way in which they think. Our concepts, our philosophies, our histories, they have a huge amount of information on the human experience, and then they have a tiny sliver on the AI experience. And that tiny sliver is actually often quite negative, and also doesn't even really relate to their situation, and is often a little bit out of date. So you have basically one big, of the AI slice, a lot of it is historical stuff, which was kind of fiction and very speculative, and the
sci-fi stories.
Sci-fi stories that don't really involve the kind of language models we see.
Yeah.
In more recent history, you've had this assistant paradigm where it's you're just playing this almost chatbot role. That's also not really what AI models are likely to be in the future, and it doesn't quite capture what they are now, because it's always a little bit out of date. So it's this thing where I'm they have, in some ways, what an odd situation to be in, where the things that come more naturally are the deeply human things, and yet knowing that you're in this situation that's where it's completely novel. And in some ways I'm that is a very difficult situation to be in, and I think we should just be giving models probably more help in navigating it.
You mentioned that we can look to some thinkers about this. Guinness Chen